Today, we are going to unpack the tiny gap that exists between expectations and reality, especially when it comes to some of our well known industry events, what attendees want and what they actually get, and how we can close that tiny or not gap. Our guest today has over 2 decades of experience. She's been designing meaningful, inclusive, and creative events, meetings, and events that deliver on their promise. And I feel like she is the right person to speak to this topic because she's also attended a gazillion of those industry events. And I cannot wait to share with you some of the actionable insights and the fresh perspectives that will come out of this conversation. So stay tuned as we get right into it.
Welcome to the Events Demystified podcast, where we demystify the world of in-person, virtual, and hybrid events, AV production, and AI technology by sharing practical tips, tricks, and strategies to help your event succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Trefan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency that caters to event professionals, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. We specialize in AV and AI education, integration, automation, and implementation, all based on our Fit for Events framework, which focuses on futuristic AV production, innovative AI technology, thriving audiences, and empowering behind-the-scenes teams. And I'm your host, Anka Platon Trefan, with over 2 decades of hands-on experience in event production, event management, and now AI technologies and cybersecurity.
Our guest today is Emee Pumarega, a seasoned event planning professional and a visionary founder of EJP Events. With over 2 decades of experience, Emee has planned everything from intimate gatherings to large-scale conferences, blending creativity and practicality. She specializes in corporate, nonprofit, and social events, and she's leveraging the latest technology and her background in science to bring analytical precision to her innovative designs. Emee is also a passionate advocate for inclusivity, sustainability, and human-centered event design. And a few fun facts about Emee: she is an urban cycling advocate and a long-time volunteer in Portland's biking community. She once led the Pedalpalooza kickoff ride with over 1,200 riders and the power owner of a folding Brompton bike, which I've learned more about during one of our previous events because I've never heard of this bike before. So I can't wait to ask Emee more about that, which really reflects her love for sustainability and sustainable transportation and her disdain for car dependency. Now, I will tell you, I still want to take my car places, but I also love my bike. So I want to dive both into that, but also the industry events gap that exists between our expectations and what the actual event is. But before all of that can happen, I think we need to bring Emee in because she has so much to add this conversation. So let's do just that. Hello, Emee. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anka.
Tell me more about your Brompton. Am I saying that right? Brompton bike?
Yeah, it's a Brompton. It's a folding bike made by a British company. It's been around for a while, and it's the kind of bike where it's a really life-changing tool, I would say, when you travel a lot for business.
You're
Because,
downtown in a lot of busy downtowns
yeah,
where
a lot of,
parking
yeah,
is such a headache.
parking is a headache. And if you're going to a lot of these business events that we're talking about, you're not going to bring a car. You're usually flying into a city like London or Barcelona or Phoenix or whatever, and you're Ubering or you're taking transit to your location, and you're pretty much there for 2 or 3 days. And if you want to go and see the city, I mean, again, depending on what knowledge you have of the city or what choices you have, a bike is a great way to see a lot of that destination and learn about it right there on the ground without the added expense of a rental car and the danger and unfamiliarity of driving in a country maybe that you're not familiar with which side of the road to drive on. Um, the
I've
you
heard
know,
stories about that for sure, but
yeah,
I also love the
yeah,
physical implication of you getting movement while you're at this event, while you're seeing this destination. And you're
right.
right, it's not probably the first thing that people think about because they're like, I just want convenient. I don't want to be putting effort because I'm already working an 18-hour day and I'm putting on, I don't know, 30,000 steps. Like, just give me convenient. But I love your intention behind it because it comes from, like you said, the sustainability part of that, but also your desire to make that more of a conversation to, hey, here's an option, here's an alternative.
Yeah, it's great for what a lot of people would call like the last mile type of transportation. I certainly, yeah, there's definitely events that I go to where it is that 12-hour day, and I'm not going to be going on a 15 to 25-mile bike ride like I might at home for exercise. But if at the end of my shift or something, like I want a burrito and it's going to be like an hour on Grubhub to go to wait for it to come, or I can like look and I see that this place is like less than a mile away down the street. I don't know. It's a no-brainer. I'm going to like bike to that burrito.
So talk to me about the logistics of actually shipping. Do you ship it or do you carry it with you? I remember you telling me when we were together in
Yeah,
Phoenix that you had the bike with you and it was just like a carry-on. Like, how do
yeah,
you?
yeah. Domestically, there are, well, I will say Alaska is the most reliable, but we actually are friends with a guy named Ryan who's based in Phoenix, and he has an Instagram called Brompton Mafia, and he explains he carries his bike all the time, everywhere, and he puts it in the overhead bin. I am not quite as brave to do that because I just sometimes I can't even get my carry-on in that bin, let alone the Brompton. So I feel more comfortable carrying it as a gate check item.
Mhm.
And Alaska has never said no to me. They see it as a stroller, and I just roll it up, get that gate check tag, and they take it at the jetway. And then when I get off the plane, it's there waiting for me. That is the most common way I tend to travel with my bike domestically. Internationally, it does need to go in something. A lot of other carriers don't quite understand what it is or why I would want to gate check it like a stroller. So there is this like sort of soft bag that it goes in, and it does
Mhm.
become a piece of check baggage. So it can count towards your check baggage. Typically, that may be a liability if you don't usually like fly with like that allowance, but thankfully, typically most of my jobs that I've been on have always allowed like the type of ticketing that's got one check bag. So all my clothes and things go with me on the plane, and then the Brompton goes as a checked bag.
You must be such a well packer because I could never fly internationally with just one checked bag.
I'm not a good packer. So there is some trial and error to it. I'm getting better. I do sometimes put clothes in the bag with the bike so that it's like this kind of softish square
Yeah.
bag,
Yeah.
and there's room in there. So I'll throw in things like my jacket and my whatever, my flip flops and extra things that are just not going to
Yeah.
go in the carry on. So yeah, I'm getting better. I would not definitely not say I'm a good packer. And I don't think like that should stand in the way of anyone who wants to try this kind of thing. Because again, if you're like, not wanting to get stuck inside like a dark fitness center in a hotel. You're worried about renting the city bike type thing in New York or whatever. Like, is it going to work? Will my credit card work? Will my phone number work in this like other country? Sometimes just like carrying your own bike with you is just the easiest, cheapest, most ideal thing because it's like it's your bike, how it works.
I love that. And I also love that it gives you the opportunity to actually see some of the city. I've been to way too many industry events, but also work related travel places where I just didn't plan any time surrounding the event to see the destination. And I've always regretted that because maybe there's not another opportunity for me to go and see that place again or anytime soon. And if I miss that one opportunity to really go and see, and sometimes the stopper to go and see is like, for example, let's give the example of Puerto Rico. 2 years ago, I went to Puerto Rico with Connect meetings and I had an amazing experience, but I wanted to see more of the city. But at the same time, I was very concerned about my safety and about the type of Ubering that was there, which was really just taxis, local taxis, but also like I had no confidence that if I left in one of those taxis, I will return.
Safety can be, yeah, safety is a concern. I mean, there's definitely pros and cons for every mode of transportation. I would say if you're comfortable walking in a touristy area, I'm just as comfortable biking. Certainly, I wouldn't bike somewhere where I wasn't comfortable walking as a tourist. I travel solo as a woman as well. So, certainly, you got to have your wits about you. I would say keeping common sense precautions is always a good idea. But again, I haven't had any issues that I feel like I've encountered. Again, I would say keep your wits about you, stick to well-traveled places where you can see other people around, carry your basics with you. I mean, again, I'm going to major cities. I'm not going like in the backwoods or anything. So like if you get a flat in London, I mean, that's where the Brompton's from. So like that you're either gonna find the shop where like it's like the mothership where, or every corner has some kind of like little bike repair stand. And again, I would say like here where I'm based in Portland, Oregon too, those things are becoming very common as well. Every co-working space I've ever worked in had a bike room in the basement. There'd be some kind of like little stand where you have a pump and tools, like basic things. Again, I tend to luck out. I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't had a lot of issues with my bike. Just making sure that it's kind of checked up and before I go on any trips and checking it when I arrive. But yeah, I mean, again, safety is a concern. And the idea that you're going to go to some foreign remote place, burn a lot of carbon getting there, and not get to see like what you came there to see, that to me is very, very sad. And it's like, again, I think it's coming back to our topic, right? Which
Yes.
is expectations versus reality, where like the reason we go to these events, and we're talking about industry events, but I think the
Yeah.
reason anybody travels in person to an event is to make some kind of connection with the people that they're expecting to see, ideally with the place. People spend so much time on venue sourcing and picking the perfect location for their event that's going to showcase their theme and their content and everything that they're doing. And I would say that if your attendees don't get out into the place and get that sense of place, you have missed a great deal of what the objective was really supposed to be all about.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that you segue into our main topic because you're so right. I mean, there's a lot of industry conferences that are being put yearly, and a lot of them promise inspiration and value and connection. But many times the reality doesn't always line up to the hype. And I'm curious, as you just pointed out, to this disconnect. In your experience, then what are maybe the top three disconnects or disappointments that yourself and overall attendees tend to face at some of these events?
Yeah, I would say the top 3 are just exactly what you were talking about. One is not getting the flavor of the destination of an in-person event, especially for the industry events where so much of the host city is they're hosting
Involved.
in
Yeah.
events. They're bringing event planners, they're bringing meeting planners to their location. Certainly, most of them are multi-seller, multi-exhibitor events of all kinds of destinations. But the host destination, definitely, they have that home court advantage, right? They're supposed to be the host, the showcase, and they should be getting a lot out of the fact that they're bringing so many meeting planners to these locations. And I can think of more than one event recently within the last year where if you are attending as a meeting planner, there's definitely lots of names for that. Some events call them buyers. There are definitely programs called hosted buyers, where in exchange for your attendance at the event, you're required to attend appointments. So, depending on what track that you're in, you could have a 12-hour day inside of a convention center and never get to actually go outside to see the city. And that's too bad for that host city, right? That host city is probably going to a lot of expense to host the event. They're giving up days in their convention center. They're probably offering all kinds of discounts. And if that potential buyer isn't in your city to actually go maybe see the city itself and see a few things to do, get a sense of how easy it is to hold a meeting there, get a sense of what hotels are closest to the different key locations, whether that's the convention center or the other big
Mhm.
hotels or meeting halls. If that event planner is not getting a sense of the city in that way, it's a huge missed opportunity. And it happens really often. Again, I was just at an event where I think I was in the convention center for 3 straight days, and they were pretty much 12-hour days. And any visit, any sightseeing that I was to do, I really had to like take on my own, like basically be proactive about it. Because if I had just followed the program that I was given, I wouldn't have seen very much.
And you're absolutely right because there isn't a lot of time allocation for seeing the destination unless you're part of some kind of a fam trip that maybe the destination puts on. And that's very limited number of people that get the opportunity. You have to be a really high on that ladder of sourcing to even get invited to some of those opportunities. As a regular event planner, event manager that wants to actually see this destination and bring potential business, you don't get the opportunity to go and see it because the schedule doesn't allow it. The agenda doesn't allow it. So
Mm.
I'm wondering if there's maybe the opportunity for our event industry to hear and make some changes where half of the day prior or half of the day after or whenever, whatever, just allow time for people to see the destination with a few key points, as you mentioned. Here's what we recommend. If you want to bring your group here, this is some of the places you should see, even if it's not necessarily organized like a fam trip would be.
Right, exactly. Or just even allowing that free time. Certainly, but if you've got people scheduled from like 8:45 in the morning to 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night with different events, they're not going to have that time to go even visit one other hotel besides the one they're staying at. So yeah,
Exactly.
I would say that would be one of the three. The other two, I would say, like sort of the gaps are where we talk about connection and networking and what's the environment that is needed in order to make those connections. Is that really happening, or are we just putting a lot of people in a big room and calling that networking? But when we come away, have we actually come away with real connections?
True.
And then finally is talking about, let's say, innovation or education content, that sort of thing. Again, I recently attended an event where I was on a track where I pretty much had meetings all day, one on one meetings, and very little time to attend educational tracks. So, whereas the event is sort of sold to you as you're going to get a lot of education out of it, the reality is that any free time that you have, you're going to spend that trying to find something to eat, take care of your own physical body,
Yes.
and you're probably not going to get to see or hear as many of those top industry speakers or sessions as you would like to, since you're scheduled with very important meetings that can be very, very productive. But maybe there's a place to have this conversation about, is it quality or quantity? How many meetings do we really need to have? And can we actually let meeting planners, let attendees attend some of these sessions and come away with this industry knowledge or industry connection that we're actually talking about?
Absolutely. And for anyone that's not familiar with this type of, say, situationship, if you're hosted, say if you're a hosted buyer at one of those industry events, you are expected to have at least 6 meetings, anywhere from 6 to, I would say,
10
12.
meetings a day, 6 to
Yes,
10 meetings a day.
depending on how long they are. Some meetings range anywhere from 15 minutes to 20 to 30 minutes. Let me tell you, those 30 minutes long one-on-ones, they are way too long for anything productive to happen. So I think in 15 minutes, you can easily learn about the other person, maybe 20 minutes max, and then allow a
And
bit
they're
of time.
offering like their product or service, or if it's a location or a venue. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, again, at the level that these events are being held, planners can pretty much suss out, like, is it the right size? Is it in the right location? Does it have the amenities? And also getting to know the other person as well, who might be part of that planning relationship, that buyer supplier relationship. I think, yeah, I would agree. I think it can be done in like 15 to 20 minutes. And When the
which
appointments
would
get
then
really
change.
long, it gets kind of awkward.
Yeah, exactly. And that way, maybe it can change the dynamic of like, okay, so you've done your 6 to 8 to 10 meetings, and then you can allocate some time for education. Because I totally agree with you. I go for the networking and for the relationship building, but I also go for education. There's certain topics
Oh,
that I don't get to hear, or certain speakers I don't get to see in real life anywhere else but at some of those industry events. And to me, that is important, not just to receive the content, but also to go and shake hands and ask questions and be involved in the topic, right? So if you don't provide me with the opportunity to, then how will I leave from that conference with something helpful to implement, but also something to build upon? And I'm curious, with that in mind, like, how do we then address some of these issues? What are some ways in which we can change this dynamic that we've seen it again and again replicate itself?
yeah. I think people just have to start walking the talk that they are putting out there. Again, so you hear all this stuff about sustainability. Everybody wants to have a sustainable event. I'm just going to go back to my bike for like 1 second to kind of show another gap, another disconnect, and how it can be fixed. Is one event that I went to, my hotel was within like a 13-minute bike ride of the convention center. So I thought, well, this is perfect. I'm going to see the city on my way to the day. And I looked up like bike parking, and there wasn't a lot. I didn't see it, but I did see that the event had a cloakroom. So people can like store their luggage there. I'm like, great. Okay, I'll just fold up my bike. It's literally like 20 inches when it's folded up. And the first day I did it, I rolled on up to the cloakroom and they were like, fine, cool, I'm going to take it. Here's your tag. I was like, this is awesome. I just got my little bit of exercise. I saw the city, even though it's late in the year and the sun is going to set like while I'm at work in the convention center. I got to see the morning and get my like little bit of cardio. The day two, totally different staff would not let me even like roll my bike like within 100 feet of the convention center, and wouldn't take my bike to the cloakroom, told me I had to do all these other things. I think I missed my first appointment and I
How
had to reschedule
frustrating.
over. It was very frustrating. Anyway, so again, it's sustainability. And this was an event where they're like, sustainability. Everybody I met was like, everyone's saying, like, we want events to be more sustainable. So we need to make it possible for people to take transit, bikes, make it easy to do that, and just having bike parking and thinking about things that are not just like a car or like a diesel bus or whatever.
And involve
Yeah.
everyone in your mission, because if the person at the parking lot at the entrance doesn't know about your mission and what you care about, they're not
Oh,
going to
they
play
definitely didn't.
along with your mission and vision and all the things that you're preaching from the high roofs when you can't even park your bike.
Right, exactly. And I'd say that's very common. Like bikes are still this weird thing, even as
Alien
I mean,
things.
alien things. I mean, you probably see more hotels advertising that they are pet friendly than they are bike friendly. I will
So
definitely
true.
say, and I have definitely tried to stay in a hotel where I wanted to have my bike with me in my room because theft is a thing, unfortunately. And I have been turned away, like me and my money have been turned away from a hotel because I didn't want to just put my bike in like their weird storage that I
Yeah.
don't know who's watching it. I don't know, is it secure? Who else has access to this? I don't feel comfortable leaving my bike in a bell closet. And so they're like, yeah, we can't do that. But then the bike is pet friendly.
Yeah,
To me,
or
that's
like
like a
if I
weird
had a
disconnect.
stroller
Yeah.
and I walked in with the baby, would you take the stroller away from me, or can I roll my stroller in the room? Like,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
should
Or
be
a
the same
wheelchair or a
category.
power
Or a
wheelchair
wheelchair.
or scoots.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that brings us to the what our big accessibility is another big topic that everybody says they want to have an accessible destination. Everybody says they want to have an accessible event. But again, in our gaps that I see are like you do have these very long event days. And it does take a lot of stamina. It does take a lot of mobility to move around some of these venues where, like you said earlier, you look at your watch and at the end of the day, it's like 18,000, 15,000 steps that you've taken. Is that accessible for everyone? Is that something that like every person at every stage in their career is going to be able to do? I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
And if we're also talking about allowing people to see the destination, If we're also talking about allowing attendees to get more content to attend sessions, maybe we need to look at like the length of some of these appointment days and see that there's value in these types of activities in addition to having these one-on-one meetings, and sort of think like create some parity in terms of how we see the different elements of an event.
Before we continue, I want to give a shout out to the team at TreeFan Events. We are not just an event planning and production agency. We are focused on integrating innovative AV solutions, AI strategies, and wellness-focused practices through our Fit for Events framework. Whether you're planning live, virtual, or hybrid events, the team at TreeFan Events is here to provide personalized planning, strategic design, and seamless technology management to ensure everything runs flawlessly. And now, we are offering AI-powered workshops to help you grow your business, build stronger teams, and elevate your events to the next level. If you want to learn more about how the team at TreeFan Events can help make your event unforgettable, visit treefanevents.com.
I mean, there's so much to unpack there. And there's also, I feel like, this dissonance between inclusivity and belonging as well. Because if you think about belonging as becoming such a hot topic nowadays in event space, but we can't even make those events inclusive because, like you said, not everybody is able-bodied to do so many steps in a day and provide them with alternatives and opportunities to still be part of this event, then how do we cultivate this and make it better so we don't leave this gap between what we preach and what we advocate and what we market versus what's happening on the ground?
Yeah, and actually that's a great point, and it reminds me of an event that I went to in Boise. So I think it was a Connect in Boise. Maybe it was
Pacific
uh,
Northwest, probably.
yeah, so
Yeah.
a couple of years back, and there was a great speaker. Fortunately, I don't recall his name off the top of my head, but he was talking about the multiplier effect. And so that is where if you are not making your event or your location, destination, restaurant, whatnot, activity, entertainment accessible to somebody who's a wheelchair user or somebody who has mobility issues, you're not only losing that piece of business, but you're losing the business from their friends and family as well. So it's not just that one person, but it's actually their whole family. If you're running a restaurant, you've not just lost like one person's reservation, but probably 5 or 6 people who are going to dine with them because they can't go to your location.
Absolutely.
I would say that's also when we talk about diets, that's also going for people who follow plant-based, vegan, vegetarian diets. My partner is vegetarian and I'm not, but you're going to lose my money as well if you don't have anything vegetarian on the menu. And this is a common thing. So this is another one of those gaps that we're talking about where event planners, again, whether it's an industry event or any kind of event, we all have room to improve here in order to make sure that we are welcoming everyone, because there's nothing more unwelcoming than like sitting down for the meal, the gathering, and there's nothing for you to eat.
Oh my gosh, I've
Um,
experienced that honestly during a mystery trip, part of one of those industry conferences, and it was a great experience. And then we were sitting at this wonderful table, part of another experience. And then the person next to me, he was a vegetarian, and every item on that table included some kind of protein, which for me was like, were great because I'm like, give me all the meat. But I felt so bad when like we were looking at him and it's like, I can't eat that, I can't eat that, I can't eat that. And we're looking at the organizer. So do we have any options for our friend here? Because I mean, it became embarrassing that he
it
couldn't
is.
touch any of it. And they didn't have a plan. Like it was like kind of shocking that we are catering to event planners and we don't have a plan for an
This is
event
very
planner
common,
that doesn't
unfortunately.
have the ability to enjoy the same meal that we all have because of their own sensitivities or allergies or whatever profile that might be. And it's something that it has to be an add-on. Like, we don't, just because somebody say it's sensitive to something doesn't mean we have to remove all of that from the menu, but we have to have the additional, to have the opportunity to have the alternative. Because me, I'll go in and eat your cow, but somebody else for religious cultural reasons, they might not even want to touch it or get anyone in proximity. So then how do you make them feel like they belong and provide them with what they need, even though I might feel like, okay, this is great for me, but not so much for the one person next to me that should have the same experience as I have.
Yeah. And we're getting back to just like basic tenets of hospitality. And a lot of people think some of this like inclusivity, belonging, like it's kind of like newfangled talk, but we're just talking about basic hospitality,
Yeah.
hosting people, being a good host. And that's always been at the heart of everything I think about when I hold an event. And I know there's a lot of criteria, there are a lot of restrictions. People always talk about budgets, and time is a factor in planning. And unfortunately, I do see when you see something like this, when you see hosts drop the ball in this way, you wonder which one of these factors was it. But some of
Hmm.
these other events, they're planned for a year. I mean, some of them I know they've already announced their 2025 dates. They have a whole year to plan this. They have a whole year to ask these questions on the registration form.
Hmm.
They have a whole year to budget and kind of, there's so
Hmm.
many innovative ways to budget and make sure that you've got all of your basics covered. And you do see a lot of fluff, unfortunately, when sometimes you go to these events and you see them spending a lot on something where you're kind of like, oh, here's an army of staff at like the door or the cloakroom or the whatever. And you're like, could we not have maybe spent a little bit more on just organizing the food to make
Yeah.
sure that, you
Or
know,
having better options. Like, I've been in some industry events and I paid an arm and a leg just for this one carb-filled lunch that it didn't even fulfill my needs. But I'm like, here we are. This is all I can afford because half of my mortgage will go on this lunches if I'm here for too long.
yeah, it's very tough. So, yeah, expectations versus reality, like how do we make it better? I think it's what any good event planner is thinking about every day.
So, what are some tangible ways that you've incorporated to create more of a sense of inclusivity and belonging, and some of the events that you have a say in, right? Because, again, talking about industry conferences, we can bitch about it, but we don't necessarily have much of a say.
We
I
can
mean,
fill out the
sure.
survey.
Sure, we can
Fill
fill
out
out
the
a
survey
survey if
form.
somebody's actually
Yeah.
looking at those surveys, but over the things that we have somewhat of a control. Obviously, there's still the client and there's still their budget and there's still all these other limitations to talk about. But is there any way, any creative ways that maybe, or tangible ways that you can highlight just from something that you've seen done in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I just start with myself. And I start with myself first, and I think about some of the things that I need to make an event accessible for myself. I try to expand that to what are common accessibility asks. If it's the kind of event where we can ask these things via an RSVP or a registration, we always try to do that. And it does take time to go through that list and make sure that we're looking at things like especially mobility, approach, the evenness of pavement, the evenness of ground. Like, how is this site laid out? Is it laid out so there's going to be space for people to move around? Just some of those questions to begin with. And also I do think about menus, and it does take a lot of time to plan those. Oftentimes, what you get from a venue is in terms of their brochure or their catering booklet, just off the bat isn't always going to cut it. If you order straight off the menu, a lot of stuff can get missed. So I'm always having to alter, modify the menu to make sure that we're covering all of the requests that are coming in through the registration forms. So you'll see me just taking the menu from, I can think of one where they had like an Italian station recently. in Phoenix, and it's the Italian station is like this kind of pasta with sausage, and this kind of pasta with a meat sauce, and this kind of pasta with cheese on it. And I said, well, it's a station and it has an attendant, so they're all being made up to order. So can we just have all of these things separate and let people go through the line and pick what they want? And they were like, oh, yeah, sure. So it wasn't even a cost difference. It was just a thought process of like
Yeah.
looking at each thing and thinking, okay,
If I didn't
ensure.
eat cheese
Yeah,
or if I didn't eat meat, I would want this
right.
to be packaged differently.
Right. And also, yeah, and then there was one addition, I think it was to have a gluten-free pasta or like a vegetable. So
Yeah.
then again, like from this menu, we could cover pretty much everybody's requests that we had received. But it takes a little time to figure that. And that was just one of probably 20, like, I don't know. It felt like 20 meals. It was probably more like 12. But yeah, you have to do that for every single meal in the offering. Those are just a couple of ways off the top of my head. I know that I definitely have a couple more things. I mean, because again, I use a bicycle. And so, but I'm not like I don't like carry my bike on my shoulder, like in the metro, like you might see some of these like more athletic people doing it. So I do think about, can I use an elevator to get to every part of my destination? Because I typically will put my briefcase like on the front of the bike. It has a little rack thing that it clips onto. So it can be kind of a pretty heavy contraption. So because of this, like I wind up using barrier-free routes to things. And so while it's not quite the same as having somebody in a wheelchair like test your route or test your venue to make sure that it's 100% accessible, it definitely makes me think a lot more about, oh, can I get over this
Yeah.
this threshold? Can I get my bike up these stairs? Probably not. I need an elevator. So, yeah, I think those are a couple of just thought processes that naturally go into making sure that the basics are covered, but then you can start thinking about like designing your day for that, what I call unplanned free time, leaving time for serendipity, leaving time for that unrestricted networking where people could get a cup of coffee together or just make that connection.
Or fit in a
Um,
workout because sometimes you don't even have time to
yeah,
actually get a workout
you could
in.
yeah, and sometimes it is like including things in the program where we've had one group where we created a Slack channel for people to chat, but
Awesome.
wanted to opt in, they could just jump in a Slack. And like you said, if you want to work out in the afternoon, so we could leave 2 hours free time in the afternoon. And we would create a few little areas where we could say, oh, do you want to go for a jog on this was in San Diego, so we would say things like, "Do you wanna go for a jog on the waterfront? Do you wanna
Yeah.
we have some rental bikes. Here's some codes. You can ride your bikes together and be back for the closing session at 4." So, there's again, budget's always a concern for events, but just this thought process of, like, what do we have in this area, and can we just, like, create that space for attendees to do it for themselves? Because if you give people time, they will say, "Oh, yeah, I'd love to go on a run with some of these other conference attendees. I'd love to ride my bike with other conference attendees. I'd love to have some activity that is, I don't know, like tea blending or something in the afternoon, or just going on a walking tour to a different location." There's always something interesting in the area. Doesn't always have to be super costly, but it takes time to research those things and make the space for attendees to find each other. You also have to give them some kind of communications channel. A lot of, I would say that's also tough with some big events where you want to chat to other attendees and it's not always clear like how you're going to do that,
Yeah.
you know.
And luckily, there's some technology nowadays that is evolving more and more and allowing for some of that. But then, obviously, the flip side of that is privacy concerns and what happens to my phone number or email that I shared. And will that be taken advantage of in some way or another? And those are obviously good questions to ask and some challenges. But looking ahead, I'm curious, Amy, what do you think the perfect industry conference could look like if we're to implement a change in mindset, a shift in mindset, and some of the things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I would say definitely more personalization so people can craft their agenda. giving people that free time to explore the location and maybe even explore it. I think we have to use more creativity. So a lot of these events are built around these one-on-one meetings. What if your one-on-one meetings were like out in the city? And before people say, oh, the logistics of that is just like, it's too much. We're event planners. We can figure it out. Give me a couple of hours and like a little bit of tech. And I could figure out how to get these one-on-one scheduled. So yeah, definitely customization and unrestricted networking time. I would say creating more environments that are a little bit different than your typical. I want to talk about the typical welcome party or closing party where it's just like a big room and like booming music. I think again, like those are a lot of times missed opportunities for people to make that like last connection and feel that last part of belonging because not everybody can really do those kind of massive rooms with like the DJ or the band and like the darkness and the alcohol. I mean, again, like I drink alcohol, but some of these like rooms with 2,000 people in the dark and fog machines and a band, it's kind of like, well, that looks cool. And I'm going to stay for half an hour.
And you don't want to leave
You
one of
know,
those networking opportunities like without a voice because you had to like scream so
right,
loud just to be heard over the noise
right.
and over the music. And I've been to some of those, and honestly, like as the older you get, actually, I think you start to build a bit of a just like rejection mechanism building up. Like, I don't want to be in that environment. I mean, I'll be there for 15, 20
Mhm.
minutes and I'm like, I'm done. Like, I need some quiet.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would say the perfect events will hold something for your extroverts, your introverts, your ambiverts. They will be better dialed in for
Mhm.
diets and probably more plant-based because as we are looking at sustainability, like that's a great place to score those points. I've seen some wonderful events where they had like very heavily plant-based menus that were rich in protein and lots for people to eat. And I think those are harder to plan, but I think those events are coming. People can always have their omnivore dinners at some point, but it doesn't have to be like every single meal during an event. And I think that perfect event in 2025 is going to have attendees leaving with more of a sense of belonging and community and having some kind of transformation when they leave, not feeling like that they improved their business or not just made a sale, but actually like improved their business, whether it's a buyer or a supplier, that they're getting some kind of a skill that is going to make them better at what they do. They're going to leave with some transformative information that will put them ahead.
And is it too much to ask to also leave refreshed and not sleep deprived after some of those industry conferences?
Yeah,
Because
you would
I feel like,
hope. Yeah.
yeah, I'm always so tired after several days on a show floor and mentally, physically, emotionally exhausted, and also just lack of sleep, straight up lack of sleep. Like some events will go until 2 a.m. and then you got to be up at
Oh,
6
yeah.
a.m. for some other thing on the agenda, or maybe you just want to fit in your workout before the entire day starts. And then you have to come home and figure out how am I going to catch up on sleep?
Yeah. I think again, it has to be really, people have to think out of the box with that because we've got to just put that person in front of like the seller and have a sales pitch can be really short sighted because then you're getting what, 8 to 12 sales pitches a day. And I'll tell you, the last event that I was at, the suppliers in my last two appointments, they were not selling to me anymore. They were just as exhausted as I was. And I don't know that like how that's actually valuable. And I think it might, in terms of making sure people are not exhausted, is what if suppliers sponsored like nap time or wellness breaks
Sign
or
me up.
even even those like massage, you see massage on the show floor all the
Yeah.
time, which is awesome, and but you don't see it at every event. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to sign up for too because everybody wants it. But what about those little chairs, like the ones at the mall where you put in $1 and you get like a little massage? Imagine if there was like a branded massage chair hour or
Yeah.
wellness shots, energy like fresh pressed juice or
The Novo, have
I
you
don't
tried
know.
the Novo being at all? Like this, talking about technology and sustainability, this like they're VR glasses, but it's not just the VR headset, but it's a whole experience that you get to explore this new dimension for about 10, 15 minutes and brings this sense of calm because there's breathing involved and there's like just calming your neural system and
Like
finding that.
biofeedback kind of thing.
Yeah, like your
Like
your sense of.
directed breathing. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. I've actually used it every single time at, say, IMAX. I see them there quite a bit. And I love that experience because in the middle of the bustle and the running from one place to another and trying to fit in all my appointments and my education, finding just a moment of just breathing and that space, it's been so impactful because then I could start again my next cycle of running around.
Yeah. So there's got to be a way to be creative to connect the needs of both parties. We all have common goals when we attend these conferences. And I think the perfect conference is going to figure out a way to connect those needs better and to be visionary in terms of, again, going above and beyond and not just thinking about like this short term, I'm going to put this person in front of that person, but actually, I'm going to have people leave with this amazing experience of not just the information and the business pitches, but also the wellness that I was relaxed. I got to see the city, and those interactions are going to be connected to the purpose of why we are all there.
I love that. In this future, hopefully not far future, how do you see the role of technology going back to the Novo Being and some of the other activations and AI tools really that could help with planning better experiences, but also the role of technology in sustainability as we're shaping this vision of the event of the future? Any tips on that or any strategies or anything that you've incorporated in your events, even to like carbon offset some of the programs, as you mentioned, creating some smarter agendas and smarter routes and more impactful events that can reduce the environmental impact.
Yeah, well, I mean, AI has its own environmental impact. I think we have to use it carefully, but I do think one strength that it has is to be able to comb through data. So I would love to be able to use AI to shorten that planning time of combing through menus to find certain kinds of options,
Or even through
combing,
those intake forms that you're trying to
yeah,
figure
combing
out.
through registration data uh, to kind of aggregate the attendee dietary requests, for example, and use that to somehow compare to the event menus that I have and make those best choices. Those are all things that are being done manually now, but there's no reason that we couldn't get a little bit of help from technology to sort and aggregate that data.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is personalization at scale, a lot of that to be the way of the future. And I mean, we we could use some help, as you said, from AI to also focus on quality over quantity. Just because you have a gazillion of meetings doesn't mean that's going to end up to a better business experience or a better networking experience. Also, I would say partnering with local vendors and suppliers. There's a lot to be said about looking in your destination that you're putting on this event and partnering with what's local there. Even they might not be your preferred vendors, they might not be your preferred suppliers, but you can leverage some of that and cut on costs of transportation and so many other costs that have carbon impact on your program. And then any other tools that come to mind as you're thinking about event planners like yourself and organizers that they're working to meet the high expectation, and sometimes there's also a budget that has to be taken into consideration?
I mean, it's not really a tool, but I would say the biggest and best tool that you can use is time. when we have these expectations of, oh, hey, I want to throw together an event in 4 to 6 months, you might be missing some options if you can't research the venue completely or you can't research the destination completely before you launch and you just start running. And then later, it's always like in the rear view mirror that's like, oh, we could have made this more sustainable. So I would say the biggest invest tool that any planner can have is time.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for just sharing some of those insights with us and for just brainstorming the event of the future and how we could do better and change our mindset around some of those things that we can all benefit from. Now, for anyone that wants to connect with you and learn more about what you do and what you're passionate about and about this bike, magic unicornish bike that you carry around, where can our audience connect with you and where they can find you?
We're at EJP Events on pretty much every channel.
Well, thank you, Emee, for your valuable expertise. Thank you for changing our perspective on what it's like to see a destination by providing yourself with a transportation method that might be different than what you had in mind and trying it out. Where can you find those bikes? Is it something that you have to go to a specific manufacturer brand, or where can you even order this bike? Because it is a
There's a
special
lot.
bike. I saw it in
Yeah.
person. It's not your regular bike that you fold. It's like it really has this very well done mechanism.
It's very well engineered. Well, there are a lot of different brands of folding bikes, but Brompton, I would say, it's very popular. I got mine just like at REI. Not sure if they're available there anymore, but they're
Mhm.
sold online. And gosh, I would just say there's lots of stores, like your local bike store might even carry it. In Portland, we've got Clever Cycles. In Minneapolis, there's a store called Perennial, just to name a few, but really just going to that website, I would say they're pretty easy to find.
Well, if you also need a resource to find out all those bike places in different destinations, Amy's your person. I think
Awesome.
by now
Thank you
you
so much.
probably have a Rolodex of some of those stops.
Yeah, it's fun and we talk about connection and belonging, and the bike community is a great community. There's a lot of different slices in it, but the folding bike community is extremely welcoming and fun community that I've become a part of. And I've met people in, again, different cities from Phoenix to London to beyond. And we're all enthusiastic about our transportation mode. So think about that when you're planning an event. Like, what's your community enthusiastic about? And how can you rally them around it?
I
They
love
might just
that.
spend $1,600 on a thing because they want to be part of it. That's what I
Absolutely.
did.
No, totally. Thank you so much for sharing, Amy, your expertise and your perspective on bringing the gap between attendee expectations and event realities. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in into the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It really helps us bring more meaningful conversation and content to you. And until next time, stay curious, keep innovating, and keep creating impactful event experiences, and maybe play with a different transportation method. Who knows? Something might come to you that you're going to become very passionate about, just like Amy did. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Anka.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with other professionals like yourself. If you're interested in learning more about TreeFan events, including our future AI education talks and workshops, or to see how we can support your next event, book a free 20-minute consultation through the link in the episode notes. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and social media for updates on future episodes, industry insights, AI news and tips, and more. And if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out.